The Legion of Superheroes was originally introduced in a Superboy story. Young Clark Kent was just hanging out. These three teenagers showed up who knew who he was, knew about his powers and his alien heritage. It turned out they were from the 30th century, and they were part of a club called the Legion of Superheroes. Teenagers from different worlds with different powers, who had all united together because of the legend of Superman, because of this inspirational story about someone from another world who would become Earth's greatest hero, showing that other cultures can learn from each other and can work together to make a greater future.
The three founders of the Legion of Superheroes were Lightning Lad, Cosmic Boy, and Saturn Girl. After them, there's been dozens of members, leaders. You know, it's literally a legion. Big. There's Bouncing Boy, who basically becomes a giant beach ball and, well, bounces around.
There's Alchemy Lad, who can change the substances of things.
There's Brainiac 5, who's the heroic descendant of Superman's arch enemy, Brainiac. He's kind of the jerk of the team, mostly because he knows he's the smartest one on it. Alan.
There's Karate Kid, who predates the movie.
Now, bearing in mind that yes, some of the members have a lot of funny names, it's supposed to be that way, because the Legion of Superheroes is supposed to be fun as much as it is supposed to be, you know, exciting and suspenseful.
Years before he would become Superman and meet Batman and join the Justice League, Clark was hanging out in the far future with these other teenagers with really funky names and cool flight rings.
Not only were the Legionnaires members of the team, they were also representatives of different worlds that made up the United Planets. Kind of like the UN, but aliens. Which is so cool. Each Legionnaire had a Legion flight ring, like this, which not only protected them from the vacuum of space, but also acted as a radio and allowed them to fly. The tech of it is related to the nth metal, which helps Hawkman and Hawkgirl fly.
The Legion often has tryouts for people who want to join up. Some people get in, some do not. Some of those rejects we never see again. Some wound up forming their own group, the Legion of Substitute Heroes, who are these well-meaning, if not quite very formidable heroes. A couple times the Legion has been reinterpreted. In the 90s, they were reinterpreted in a reboot right after a story called Zero Hour, and now they were all given very different names. Lightning Lad became Livewire, Shadow Lass became Umbria. Eventually, sales just weren't going, so they rebooted it again. A 3-boot, it's been nicknamed, under the direction of Mark Waid. This was a very cool take on the Legion that viewed them as a social movement in the future, that basically the future had become so into taboos. The Legion of Superheroes were teenagers who wanted to challenge the social norm, who wanted to show kids, you know what, you're allowed to have fun, you're allowed to break a rule on occasion, you're allowed to have an opinion and have a disagreement with someone in public. It's cool. Eventually, though, this 3-boot version ended. We're now back to the original Legion of Superheroes, now older and living in the 31st century. And Paul Levitz's new series, Legion of Superheroes, is showcasing this team.
You started going to school at New York University, and then you didn't finish, right? You left and
dropped out along the way, yeah.
And you became editor for Adventure Comics, which had been around since 1935, when you were 20?
I think so.
Now, how did that happen?
Well, I mean, I was at DC for a long stretch before that. I started freelancing at DC when I was 16 and in high school. Doing letter columns, the DC equivalent of the bullpen page. Which,
right.
I guess the first books I full edited, I was still 19 years old. Inherited Adventure somewhere along the way around 20, and Batman at about 21.
Yeah, see, which blows my head, because I'm just thinking, like, if I as a 21-year-old was told I was editing Batman, I wouldn't even know what to do with myself. Like, it just...
Well, you probably start the same way I did. You go in the library and reread every Batman story there ever was and say, wow.
How is it coming back to it this many years later, when not only have things changed, but there have been 2 separate versions of the Legion, two reboots of it that were completely a new take on the characters, and now we've gone back to the original version, and you're taking that up. Does it make you think about it in a different way, or Is it just, well, these are my old friends, I know what to do?
These are kind of my guys, plus a few years. Their lives have changed a bit. But the world's changed enormously. The last time I was writing a Legion, the personal computer had a penetration in people's homes of probably 10 or 15%.
Right.
It was a new appliance. There was no such thing as the internet as a consumer product. So when you looked ahead in a book that was about the future, you were projecting a future that in many ways has gotten here in the 20 years in between. So I have to rethink a lot of what the future is going to be. Now we know that we've got an audience that includes a really high proportion, particularly on Legion, of grown people with complex lives, deep knowledge. They tend to be very educated people. So how do you use that? What can you put in that you couldn't put in before? How do you deal with not more adult story matter in the sense of more sexual or more violent, but more adult in terms of maybe some different layers of complexity in terms of the attitudes, the personalities of the characters. I don't know that I'm succeeding in all of that, but at least I'm thinking about all of that. An Earthman who is a wonderful concoction, really, that Jeff built on a very minor character from the mythology, has a very strong set of issues. He's dealing with the whole issue of xenophobia. Well, that's racism, in our terms. And we're living in a time when the clash of civilizations, the issue of whether or not the different backgrounds on Earth, different religious backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, will learn to live with each other or will figure out a way to blow each other up. Right. But it's really interesting to use that and do a science fiction allegory of it and be able to take as much as you need and do it as metaphor and address the issues, or at least raise the issues so people think about them.
It's really what the best science fiction is supposed to do. Like
absolutely.
Star Trek, Isaac Asimov, I mean, that's all what it would do.
I grew up as an enormous Asimov
I love
fan,
Asimov.
and he was I probably read 100 of his 300 books growing up,
Yeah.
including a lot of the science stuff. Much of my science I learned from his old New Intelligence Man's Guide to Science.
What is it about the Legion of Superheroes that we keep going back to them? What is it about this club of people who have what some might call ridiculous nicknames in this day and age, like Starboy and Light Lass? What is it that we keep finding fun and interesting about them, do you think?
Well, certainly you wouldn't create them identically if you were starting from scratch today, I suspect.
Sure.
But it's a fantastically rich world. You have hundreds of planets, you have hundreds of characters. You don't have to understand the rest of the DC universe. And on some level, it's the same magic that Pokemon had for young kids. If you came into it at the right age, wow, I can learn this, I can deal with all of this and play with it. Fun stuff. Hopefully, we'll catch a new generation too.
All right, well, sir, it's been a great pleasure meeting you and talking to you. Like your career is a bit of inspiration,
Thank you.
and I look forward to everything in the future.
Thanks. Take care.
You too.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the interview and the crash course in the LSH. Be sure to check out the new series if you're an old fan. Lots of great stuff in there for you to enjoy, and if you're a new fan, which you will become shortly, it's a great jumping in point. So what are you waiting for? Go run, buy comics, be happy. And be sure to check out our other episodes on things you should be reading. See you later.
I'm very popular with the overweight and underweight crowd.
What does that make me?
That makes you pretty. Shut up.